Test recording side 2, test recording side 2. This is March 13th, 1973, Llewellyn Park, West Orange, New Jersey. Interview with Mrs. Sloane. Reporter Kenneth K. Goldstein. Going to play back now.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
This is the end of a significant test recording. Going to play back now. March 13th, 73, West Orange, New Jersey. Side 2, starting interview with Mrs. Sloane. Mrs. Sloane, we were just talking about some of the impressions about your father which you considered to be wrong, namely that he was a street Arab and grew up out of nowhere. Can you tell us a little bit about his background and his family?
Well, his, great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, John Edison, was the first one we know of that was here in New Jersey. They came over in, they say, 1730. And he and his mother, who was a widow, and they landed in Elizabethport. And then when he grew up, he had a big farm in Caldwell, around in Caldwell somewhere, not very far from here. And in the Revolution, they were loyalists. And after the Revolution, of course, he was exiled to Nova Scotia, where the British provided ground for those that had been loyalists. Not very good ground, but ground. And then they were there for a generation, I think, and the whole family went across Canada to Ontario, and there they settled. And my own great-grandfather served with the British in the War of 1812. And then Sam, his son, there were two Sams. That was Captain Sam that was with the British. And then my grandfather, Sam, was with the Mackenzie, no, that's not right. Well, it's the rebellion up there in Canada, Pepino-Mackenzie Rebellion, I think it was. And he had to escape from the British and the Indians and get across the river. And then he went down through the wilderness and he struck Milan, which was a little town on the canal. And it was a famous grain port in those days and very prosperous. And he thought, well, I'll settle here. So he did. And he stayed there for about, Father was 7 when they left, I think. And the railroad came in and spoiled the canal business. And they went to Port Huron, Michigan, and that's where his boyhood was spent there.
So he had a very solid family.
So he had yes, and his mother was a very exceptional woman. And she had been a school teacher, and I think he was pretty lucky to have had her, because he was too delicate to go to school very much, and asked too many questions, I guess. But she took him out because the doctor thought she ought to, and taught him herself.
When you say delicate, do you mean was he frail?
Yes, he was. Mm-hmm. The doctor said the breaths of the children were bad for him.
I wonder if they say things like that anymore.
So she taught him, and taught him to read, and then of course he read everything in sight.
She must have taught him how to find out things for himself as well.
Well, yes, I don't think she had to do much teaching. He asked so many questions. I think the schoolmaster didn't relish that either.
So he had a rather established...
But he had an established home and there's a photograph of him and his sister, which is really, I saved for you to see. And they were strict, too. I mean, his mother was.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because it seems that sometimes he was very strict with his children, too.
That who? That he was?
Yes.
Yes, at times.
Do you think that the lessons of his own childhood, the experiences of his own childhood were kind of influencing him in raising his own children?
Yes, I imagine they would. He was a very good son. And there's a letter in there about his sending a phonograph to his sister, and he took a lot of trouble about that. And to see that she had a phonograph. And he was very, he took care of his father too, and saw that he was looked after. I think he was very good to his relatives.
He seems to be a very generous person with most people he dealt with that he liked very much.
Oh yes, I think he was.
As a child, I noticed you got several letters from him. Did he?
Yes, he wrote to me a good deal. And I was supposed to write to him. And usually he'd write, "Why don't you write to your papa?" That's most of them. But those, I think, that we just looked at are very nice letters.
Can you tell us about some of them, Mrs. Sloane?
Well, they're just about all like that. And
There were two I noticed in particular when you were out at Long Beach, New York, spending the summer. And he wrote to you asking you to take care of your brother, asking when your brother Charles would start walking, and commending you for being a good girl because you listened to your mama.
that's right.
He set a high store upon that.
Oh yes, we were to take care of Mother, whatever happened.
Did he spend much time out on the beach with you?
Well, he did when he came down. There's another letter that says when he comes down he will float for us, show us how to float. And he was apparently very worried about going out far, and he wanted us taught to swim because he thought it might be good in an emergency. I don't know where he thought we were going to have the emergency to swim, but he insisted that we be taught. And he kept repeating that, so I guess he meant that.
And did he indeed teach you how to float?
Well, I don't remember that. I was only 3 years old. But I do remember the waves and things like that. It's about the first thing I do remember.
Was he fond of playing games with the children?
Only for Cheesa, I think. That was his
And you mentioned
sport.
he liked to win.
Yes, he did.
We're going to talk more about the family life and the relationships within the family. Can we start by talking about what it was like here when he was home on a Sunday, for example?
Well, of course, we were leisurely in the morning, and he read all those newspapers. He had 5 newspapers or so to get through, and they were all over the living room first, and that was the morning. And then he would take us walking. We'd go out and collect specimens, botany specimens and so forth. Then we'd match them up, and he always liked to win there too. But and we took automobile rides, of course. He liked that.
Did you have many guests over on Sundays?
Yes, we did. We had Mother's family and a lot of friends. People would drop in. And when the family was all there, we'd read, take parts and read Shakespeare plays or something like that. And I remember one day we read Enid Garden, Tennyson's, and pass the book from hand to hand when everybody would choke up and then they'd pass the book. And at the end, we were all in tears. It was very funny. Those were my aunts and uncles. They were in college. They were young people.
I noticed in one of your tours around Glenmont, you talk about your uncles from Yale.
Yes.
Used to show up.
Oh, yes, and all the glee club and all the crew and everything else. They all came down. They'd come weekends, you see. And my aunts were in Wellesley, so we had quite a gay time.
Must have been quite a chore for your mother to feed the whole brood.
Yes.
A very big
she
table.
was quite busy. Yes, we had about, Christmas we'd have about 30 people.
That's an awful lot of people. Did your father like
Yes,
large
he enjoyed it. He really had a lovely time with the young.
Was he fond of teasing them?
Oh, yes, of course. That was his great thing. But he really enjoyed them. He didn't like formal entertaining at all, but he did like them. He liked to see them and so forth. But then he used to, he'd have different streaks of doing things. I remember one winter, I guess it was more than that, we'd go down to Vaudeville in Newark every Tuesday night. We went regularly. And we didn't do any homework that night. And we'd pass the Methodist church on the way, and Mother had qualms of conscience every Tuesday night because it was prayer meeting night. And she was being taken to the vaudeville.
Oh my.
But that was quite interesting. We enjoyed that, especially if we didn't have to study.
He loved entertainment then?
Yes, and he could hear enough for that. There was enough going on so he could hear. But he was very disappointed when they made the sound come in moving pictures, because he loved going to the movies. But everything had to be a happy ending. He didn't like tragedies. But if it was a happy ending, then it was all right. And when the sound came in, of course, he couldn't
hear that.
And it wasn't fun anymore. That was rather sad, I think.
Did he ever talk about making movies to you people, making his own motion pictures?
Oh, he did make them.
I know, but did he talk to
had the
you?
Bronx studio up there.
Did he talk to the children about them?
Yes, and we talked to him. And we had these two white steam cars that I mentioned before. And one of them they were going to use in a thriller and put it over the Palisades. And I said, oh, can't I go and see that? And he said, what do you want to see that for? There are only dummies in it. Which I thought was sort of bloodthirsty. I don't know that it would have helped if they'd been real people. But that was the reaction, which I was amused.
Did he like cowboy thrillers too?
Not so much, I think. He had a very interesting trip west in '78, you know.
No.
He was tired. It was his own, well, it's really the only vacation I think he had in those days. And he went west, and I think it was Jay Gould has fixed it so he had permission to ride on the cowcatcher of the engine. And he saw all the west from the cowcatcher of the engine. And he said it was all right until that one day they struck a raccoon or something. And that wasn't quite so good.
My.
But he took us west, and we enjoyed that. And he'd tell us all about the cowboys and the bad men he'd seen and so forth. Had a very thrilling time.
Did you travel by train and by car?
No, he traveled by train in '78, but this was a later trip when we were on board.
You went by car?
We went by car, yeah.
So must have been a very tedious and long trip then.
Well, I don't know. It wasn't too bad.
And overseas, you traveled extensively. I know we talked about that in our last interview.
Yes. Well, um, those were great trips. He wouldn't let us all go together because he didn't want the whole family obliterated at once. And so Mother and Theodore and I went over one boat, and then he and Charles came later. And they landed in England the night that they abolished the House of the Lords. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what was that? House of Lords, you call
Yeah.
it, don't you? We missed that. And there was something I wanted to put in, I can't think what it is now, about those trips. Oh, I have never liked the way that Father was treated by the press very much. And I thought he treated them much better than they treated him. And when we went to Paris, or as we were leaving Paris, we found that we were followed by this reporter, and it seems that Mr. Pulitzer had pulled him out of the hospital to come and follow us, and had given him a chauffeur who didn't speak English, and a car, and so forth, and he was to follow us and give a story twice a week. And we didn't know he was following us until we suspected this car, and then we turned in, and it went sailing by, you know, and stopped and turned around when we knew we were being followed. So Father was very angry because he didn't want that at all. He wanted to get away from that publicity and so forth. And so didn't I tell you this before? I don't know. But when we got to Aix at last, this poor man buttonholed Charles and said, "Mr. Edison, couldn't you tell me at least where you expected to go? Because I haven't had any mail for a week, and I haven't had any laundry, and I can't do this." So after that, Charles gave him the
Pulitzer
destination,
man.
and we sort of adopted him. And he had a heart attack up in the mountains in Austria. Well, he had been taken out of the hospital bed, as far as I could make out, with heart trouble. And so our chauffeur was an Englishman, and he came to Mother and said, "Miss Edison, do you mind if we delay a little bit, because Mr. Valentine's very sick, and he wants me to take his last wishes." And so Mother said, "Well, of course." So we waited, and he was better, and Mother trotted up with her little medicine chest that she always carried everywhere. And he wouldn't let her in because he looked so terrible, he said. And she did get in, I think, though. And he recovered more or less, but he wasn't fit to travel. And so Charles stayed behind with him, and we went on. And we landed in this place we were going to spend the night, and Father went to bed. And pretty soon, Mr. Valentine and Charles arrived. And Theodore came rushing in to Father, and he woke him up, and he said, "Mr. Valentine has got a deadline to meet, and will you get up and give him an interview?" And Father meekly gets up and gets dressed and goes in, and Mr. Valentine is there, half sort of, that's right. And Charles wrote the story, and Father got the interview, you know, gave him some romance, and they got the thing off, and Mr. Valentine got his deadline in.
Oh.
And I think that was quite decent of Father.
He should have gotten a byline for it.
Yes, he should. Well, it was Charles's story. He did a beautiful job.
Did Mr. Valentine stay with you throughout the entire trip after
Yes,
that, too?
he did.
What was his first name? Do you recall?
Well, it was, I don't want him mentioned.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know whether he'd like that or not. But his name was E.A.O. Valentine, and he's an author. And he was, I think, the editor of some paper down in Kentucky. Unless I'm thinking of...
So every trip you took was not just an ordinary trip. There was always something special.
Oh, well, you couldn't help being... Well, is there ever anything special about a trip? I think there always is.
I've never heard a story quite like that one, though.
But I loved Father's getting up out of bed and getting dressed, and they both hunching over this story. And poor Mr. Valentine couldn't do much.
Well, from what I understand, your father was really lovely to most of the newsmen who covered that. He always
Well,
gave them a story.
He did, because he had known a lot of the press when they were in his young days, you know. And when they were only paid by the line and not very much at that.
Yeah.
So he always tried to give them a good story. And then they'd say he couldn't be taken seriously. And I have a couple of letters to prove it in there.
These were letters that were written to him, or ones that he wrote to were written
No,
to him.
I mean, there's an editorial in the Tribune that made me so mad I answered it. So I have both of them.
What was the editorial in the Tribune?
Well, it was about, there it is. It's about the you remember they had this questionnaire?
Yes.
Scholarship.
Right.
Well, here's the Tribune's Young Edison's Luck. And they say Mr. Edison says he is no mathematician. Perhaps he isn't even a logician. In view of his expressive means of college training, he must have reasoned like this. College men don't know much, therefore I will send my boy to college. And then it goes on. His son, Theodore, has just graduated from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and so forth. And he says that he's given this questionnaire to other people and this so forth. But there will be no such trial for Theodore. After all, the inventor of questionnaires and other things is human, an indulgent father. He's humane. The questionnaire will not keep young Edison out of a job at the plant at East Orange. He has already, as Main Street says, accepted a position. We wonder if the great public will ever again take Mr. Edison seriously when he declaims against the ignoramus with a college degree.
And what was your answer to
And
that?
I said, I cannot see that in sending his son to college, Mr. Edison is even illogical. So far as I know, he has never said that knowledge was not to be had there if one cared to acquire it. In fact, it has always seemed to me that his ideal of a college education is so high that he expects too much from it and is therefore disappointed at its average product. Yours for the preservation of the editorial calm, Madeleine Edison Sloane. There's a lot more, but I said, usually when Mr. Edison goes anywhere, he's immediately surrounded by a crowd of, shall we say, persistent young men who demand his views about everything under the sun, often indeed including the entire solar system plus the regions of uncharted space. They then pick out a few stray phrases and send in articles to the newspapers. Nobody blames them. Probably they must eat. Next day come the editorials. Mr. Edison is a publicity seeker. He is uneducated. He is not to be taken seriously because of approaching second childhood. He knows nothing about anything but electricity. Therefore, it is presumptuous in him to dare discuss any other subject. He is dogmatic and so forth. Remarks of this nature I have read in editorials at various times during the last 10 years, and I would like to know, first, why importune a man for his opinions if only for the purpose of attacking him editorially next day? It seems so ungracious somehow, backbiting the hand that feeds the press, as it were. Second, do editors always write on subjects in which they themselves are specialists? Who writes the editorials on prohibition, for instance, or murder? Third, Why not instruct reporters interviewing Mr. Edison to limit their conversation exclusively to the discussion of volts, amperes, and electrons? Probably nothing would come up to rouse the editorial temper, and Mr. Edison would have much more leisure time to enjoy his outing. Fourth, the questionnaire seems particularly to enrage the editorial mind. Why? If the Tribune decided to employ only reporters who could play the ukulele, would that be anybody's business but the Tribune? And then I said, I cannot see that in the paragraph I read first. And they published the whole business.
My, you really laid it into them. What date was that published?
That was, all right, Bob.
Excuse me. I left the things on the...
I was asking you what date that editorial appeared, and I wondered if you can recall.
Oh, no, when was the questionnaire? Why did I close this
It was
up?
the 1920s.
Oh, something like that.
1920, something like that.
I think
It was the New York Herald Tribune?
yes.
All right, I think it was about 1920.
There probably isn't a date on here. Yeah, it was about then. Oh yes, 23.
1923.
June 14th, 23.
Right.
I used to write papers a lot. Now I wouldn't bother. Only I wish that the New York Times would get out a Hate Nixon supplement. And then we could all go on with the rest of the news.
Well, maybe they should. Did your father write letters to the editor at all? Never. Did he pay any attention to what they were saying? Or?
No, I doubt it very much. Goodbye.
I noticed, reading through some of the things that you tape recorded for Glenmont, that you mentioned a portrait of your father, made when he was 78, 79, something like that. Did he, was he the kind of a man that had to be sort of strapped down to sit for a portrait? Did he like?
He never did. And he didn't believe in portraits. He thought the camera was the thing. And Mr. Sylvette took measurements of everything, all his things, and he thought that was all right. He liked that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was another artist who was really, I think, a better artist, who tried to do it, and he wouldn't pose for him. And the poor man would sit at the table and look at Father and then rush upstairs and put in an eye or something and then come down and take another look, and Father just sat and let him do it. And he would not pose. He never would. And he didn't let Mother have her portrait, which was a shame. She was, I forget how old, but it was, well, she was well over middle age when he finally, I guess she had it done anyway.
Both of you had your portraits done by the same artist, didn't
Well,
you?
that's Vikaja, yes, she was an English girl that was in this country. She's done some very nice things. So we both had, and then they tried another one and that didn't work. So, but Mother should have had a portrait when she was younger. She was perfectly beautiful.
Were there any photographs taken of her when she was?
Yes, but they don't do her justice, I think.
Did they ever talk about their courtship?
Oh, yes. Well, they didn't talk about it. Those are in there.
The letters?
I feel rather
What was
like
it?
I'm sort of intruding when I read them. But I have to read them. And there's a letter. We didn't know what to do with those letters. And they've been in the vault all this. I mean, they've been in safe deposit. And now I've got to do something. And we don't want them to get out. But I'd like to fix them chronologically, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while you get something that's very interesting.
Is it anything you could talk about now? Or
Well, I haven't really got to that early ones yet. But They're quite nice letters.
Well, you
I read them once, but I've sort of forgotten them.
I read the few letters you had here, and he seems to have a very easy narrative style. He tells a story.
Yes, I think he did. He could write when he wanted to, and he would tell her all kinds of things about the business and all that. He just sort of flowed along.
Well, the story about the mine, the letter you gave me.
Letter.
The complete story of going up there and wondering why the mine wasn't doing well, and finding that the superintendent was a little bit on alcohol, and the line in there was that he fired everybody within about a half hour.
Well, there are a lot of little touches like that. And then the endings are marvelous, and the beginnings. I don't know, I think I could find another letter but not in time to do this. But he would send her all these things. And sometimes he'd write little sketches, do little sketches on the bottom of the letter, and so forth. And she was very lonely while he was up at the mine. Of course, he only got down weekends, and not even then sometimes. And so I remember one letter that said, "I got a letter from you today in several shades of blue."
Was that for a very long period of time when he was
Well, it was
at the mine?
10 years, I think.
10 years?
I remember that. That was when I was a little girl. And it got to be quite, well, it mattered, of course, that he'd go up there for the week and then come down Sundays. And then, you know, when he got the whole thing going and everything, they discovered ore in the Mesabi Range up in Canada, and there wasn't anything to do with the low-grade ore.
So all of the 10 years?
Yeah. And $1 million or so. And that's when he wrote that other letter that just came out that belongs in Marietta, Ohio. I had that somewhere. And it's an order for some machinery, and he calls himself poor and needy. And this was when he was 46 and living over at Glenmont. And they published this whole letter, and I just wonder if they realize it's humorous.
Who published the letter?
Well, Marietta College has got it in their collection. And then when this Inventors Week came out, they released this letter, and it's been in the papers out there. And the headline is Milan's claim to fame was an inventive wheeler-dealer.
Wheeler-dealer? I hadn't heard that phrase in any of the biographers.
Well, no, I don't think it would have come.
That's very new.
What is a wheeler-dealer?
I know. Well, whatever it wasn't your father. A wheeler-dealer would be somebody who was very close to being a manipulator.
Well, that's what I thought.
fast
That
dealer.
somebody else told me it was.
According to the records, he wasn't anything like that.
No,
as a
but as
businessman.
a shrewd person,
Yeah.
he said. Shrewd. I thought it was worse than that. I thought it was the connotation was
no.
not good.
No, it's they apply this most usually to Texans who are considered to be big wheeler dealers, always making big deals and for millions of dollars, for millions of pounds or millions of gallons or something. Always dealing in millions and billions.
Well, this goes on to say he wanted to order these 4 machines and it was an opportunity for this man to use his philanthropy or something, and he just wanted to buy it at 10% profit to the man.
Mm-hmm.
And if that wasn't enough, to raise it gently. And it's funny, and I don't think they get the humor of it. I don't know. But I didn't like the headline much.
Well, you've probably seen a lot of nonsense written about your father over the years.
Yes.
And you said that they missed the point about him more often than
Well,
not.
they always miss the point, I think.
What do you think?
Because of this image that I told you. He's supposed to be Dick Whittington, or what was the man who was always writing about success stories?
Horatio Alger.
Yes, Horatio Alger. And that's the pattern that they have predicated everything on, and one copies from the other. Then they go, if they want any material, they go to the back files of some paper and it comes out just the same. That's what I dislike.
There is a theory that if you perpetuate a lie or something completely wrong long enough, it
Yes.
becomes the truth.
Yes. I don't mind if they tell the truth, but they give an entirely wrong impression, it seems to me.
Perhaps. Did Matthew Josephson come closest to capturing?
I think he's done a very
Flavor.
good job, yes. But I don't... He's quite a psychologist. But I don't think he's got him entirely. He depended on the people down there a lot.
You mean the people at the laboratory who he interviewed?
He came to see me once, I think, and didn't get much.
Who do you think, among his contemporaries, knew your father best, or understood him best of all?
Well, there were 2 or 3 people, I think. Of course, this Mr. Gilliland, they were buddies, but that didn't work very well.
Right.
And a Mr. Mallory and a Mr. Upton. Mr. Upton especially was his mathematician. And then there were the Mr. Aylesworth's chemist, and that poor man that experimented with radium before we knew how awful it was, and he died of it. Dally, his name was. And, well, there were quite a lot of them. Insel, of course, was his office boy there. He knew Insel very well, and he used to help Insel out. And one of these letters to Mother says, don't blame me for helping Sam, because he's done a lot for me, and I think ingratitude is the greatest sin there is. So,
What happened when Insel became this big utilities tycoon?
well, he had fallen.
A big fall, but did he correspond with your father after that?
Well, I don't know. I think he died very soon after that, didn't he? I don't remember. But this was an earlier time. He had overextended himself in the stock market, I think. And Father helped him out. He worried about other people in the stock market. The letter in there about, is your father all right? This was in '93. Well, Father wasn't all right. He lost a lot. Lost everything, really.
In the stock market?
Yes, because he was my grandfather, you see, he had met Mother's father, and they were great pals. He liked Father. And that was Panic of '93, and he got a letter in there telling her about the stock market and so forth and so on.
You were far closer to the Millers than to the other relatives, weren't you?
What other relatives? Oh, you mean the Edisons?
Yeah.
Well, you see, grandmother was dead. She died long ago, and grandfather married again, and he was out there in the West.
Was there an uncle that lived at Glenmont with you for a while?
Oh, that was Uncle John, Mother's brother, yes.
Right.
Or my older brother. he was very much younger, you see.
Uh-huh.
And so I always thought of him more as an older brother than I did my uncle. He was the Yale one. And then there was a younger one than he, and he was killed in the Spanish War. And I remember him. He was a Rough Rider. And I remember him riding around the circle over there, bareback on one of the team, our team. And I can see him now. And the next thing I knew, he was killed he died in Siboney Hospital there. He went up San Juan Hill and was wounded.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very fond of those uncles.
Did several of them go into your father's business?
No, just Uncle John.
Your husband was in the war too, wasn't he?
Yes. Well, he was in the Second World War.
Second.
Mm-hmm. Not the Spanish War.
That'd be asking a lot. When did your father first meet your husband? Was this
My father meet my husband.
your husband to be?
Well, he was the boy next door.
Was he the boy?
Well, he was in South Orange.
Really?
So we knew each other. We had a big crowd. About 40 of us went around together, which they don't do nowadays,
No.
apparently. But we had grand time together, all of us. Yes, we were brought up in just adjacent towns.
Was this before you went to Bryn Mawr or after?
After. I wouldn't stay in Bryn Mawr. I thought I'd walk with a cane before I got out. So I only stayed 2 years, which I had always intended. I don't know if the mother intended it, but I did. And so I came back, and I'm glad I did.
Did your father?
I'm a dropout.
Did your father ever say anything about that?
No.
And then you came back and ran around with this crowd
Then
and
I
met your
had a
husband.
good time, yeah. For 2 years, I had a wonderful time.
What was it like when you told your father you were getting married?
Well, of course, there were troubles because of the religion. See, my husband was a Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't like it too much. But they got over it. It took me 4 years, but God, they got over it.
Must have been 4 hard years.
It was.
Did you live in West Orange after you were married?
Yes. Oh, no, we didn't. We went to New York.
Yeah.
We lived in Greenwich Village. We lived on 8th Street.
8th near where?
Near Fifth Avenue there.
Oh,
They're all
where the
down
arches.
now,
yeah.
you know,
Near the
those
park?
houses. We had an apartment on the 4th floor without central heat.
What was that hotel right on the...
The Brevoort.
The Brevoort. They with the outdoor garden.
Yes.
Oh,
And the Lafayette further over.
And across the street, the hotel, Fifth Avenue Hotel, was it?
Well, I wasn't really. We never went there. I was too dressy. I don't think that was going when we were there. We were there quite early, you see.
The Brevoort was very
But,
nice.
oh, it was lots of fun then. It was not well, it was bohemian in a way, but nothing like now. I wouldn't go there. But it was great fun then.
Did your father visit you at all?
I don't remember his coming in there. No, I don't think he did. Came to visit me when my baby was born in the hospital, but not there.
And you stayed in Greenwich Village for how long?
We were there a year, and then we decided to get out. The summer was pretty bad.
Very hot.
So we went to Plainview. My husband was in aviation. He was had the Sloane Airplane Company.
Mm-hmm.
And they made biplanes. Funny now, there aren't any biplanes.
They have a few up at Rhinebeck, New York.
Do they?
Yes, they
Still
have.
going?
They have some World War II biplanes, and they fly them several times a day as part of an air circus in Rhinebeck, New York.
Well, I didn't know that.
Oh,
We used to go out to Belmont Park
they have the
and
old
hope they got over the telegraph wires.
they have the old Spads, the Hispano Suzas, the Camels.
Mhm.
All of the old airplanes are out there now.
Well, I think I was before that.
Would he ever have known a man named Grover Loaning?
Yeah, I've heard the
He
name.
was an airplane designer.
Yes.
First man to get a degree
Yeah.
in airplane designing from Columbia University. But he was one of the early pioneers.
Yeah, I know. He was one that my husband knew.
He's still around.
I didn't know that.
Yes, he is. How about that?
Well, those were the great days. Our man won the Times Aerial Derby. You remember that? The
Oh,
Times
yes.
ran a
Mm-hmm.
transcontinental affair.
And the New York one of the London papers used to run air
Yes,
races
they had
too.
one too.
Were you a flyer?
No, I fly?
Yes.
Oh, no, I made my will when I first went up. And that was to go to Boston. And it made so much noise we couldn't hear each other, so we passed notes back and forth. No, I never flew. My husband learned how, but I think, but he never had a license.
Did your father fly?
No, didn't believe in him.
No.
Oh, he thought the what's the one that goes up?
Autogyro?
The jet?
Helicopter?
That helicopter. He thought that was the coming thing, and he wasn't crazy about that either.
But he liked.
Well, I think he stopped with the airplanes. I don't think he really liked them. You
That's
know, they say
strange.
you stop at a certain point,
Mhm.
and I think that was his beloved motor cars and his other things were all right, but airplanes were a little too much.
What did he think about radios? That
Well, he worked on radios. The boys can tell you about that.
Yeah.
Theodore will. They wanted him to do something and he didn't want to, and they had a terrible time. But Theodore had better explain that.
Yes, I would think so. Your father met Lindbergh, I understand.
Oh
from the
yes,
book.
he was out here at the time of the, no, it wasn't the questionnaire. Yes, I don't know. He was, well, they had some kind of a festivity over there with the president of Exeter was there, and quite a number of celebrities. Oh, can't think of anybody's name. Is that thing going?
Yes, I could shut.
Dear
Your relationship with your father, first you were the little girl, and he wanted you to mind your mother and help your brother. And then, did it change over the years as did his respect for you change as you changed into a woman? His relationship to you change?
Well, no, except that I didn't always agree with him, and said so.
He didn't mind too much, though, did he? Really?
No, not really. But, for instance, I always wanted to ride horseback. And Mother had ridden horseback when she was young. And, of course, he wouldn't let her ride. And he said more women were killed that way, percentage-wise, than any other. And this was when we wore side saddles.
Yeah.
So that, I frothed him out with that, because I wanted to ride. And one Christmas, my brother Charles got a pony, and I got an automobile, which I was absolutely disgusted. And then I never gave up wanting to, and so I fooled him. I got a divided skirt, and I rode astride, and he couldn't say that I'd fall off, you see. And I had lots of fun riding down in Fort Myers, and we were allowed to do more in Fort Myers than any other place. And I wrote all the time after that. But I did write astride, which he didn't think was so bad. But we tried to please Father in every way. He was next to God, and we all had that in us, drilled into us, and we felt that way too, you see. So I just think the relationship was all right.
Did you feel as if you were living with part of history, knowing that your father was responsible for so much?
Well, not so much like that. We just loved him.
But it must have been awe-inspiring at times to meet friends and have your friends say, are you really Mr. Edison's daughter?
Well, that drove me up the wall.
Really?
Yeah. What does it feel like to be Edison's daughter? Didn't feel like anything but having a nice father that I cared about. No, I don't like that question, and I get it all the time. In fact, that's the opening of another article I wrote.
Which one was that?
That was in the program for the premiere that we had here, you know?
No.
We had a premiere
What premiere?
of Spencer Tracy's film. That was here in Orange.
Oh.
And we worked hard on that. They had committees and they had all kinds of things. But, never again.
What did you write in this article about?
What?
You said you wrote an article?
For the program, yeah.
What did it say?
Oh, well, it's around here somewhere. I don't know where. But it was just a sort of, well, I won't say, sort of an appreciation of Father.
At one time you said, in the last interview, that with some people you never knew whether they liked you for yourself or because you were.
Well, I think you get that. I think all children of prominent people get that. And it's no joke. I think Father, for instance, I think was quite disappointed in his older sons, but he didn't realize what those boys were up against. I mean, they didn't go down to the factory. Well, they did later, but not right away. And they had been, their mother had died, and they were only 13 and 11 or something like that. And it's pretty tough. And they were farmed out to an uncle or something. And I don't think he realized what they were up against.
The children of famous parents historically have always had.
Well, they do.
Tough.
I think Edsel Ford had a horrible time. And I don't know about the kings and queens, but I don't think they have too good a time either.
Especially the children of movie stars. I understand.
Oh, and they have a terrible time, I think.
They can't possibly live up to their parents.
Although their parents tried. When we were out there, Maureen O'Sullivan used to come down every lunch hour, and the baby would come down with a nurse and limousine and so forth, and meet her outside the cafeteria, and she'd walk up and down with the baby. And I thought, well, my goodness, is that the way you're going to bring up your child? That's all she saw of it.
That was it. What was it like in Fort Myer during those vacation periods down in Florida?
Heavenly. We had the best time there we had anywhere. We were way in the country then, and now we're in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, everything was so much relaxed, and Father would fish every day, and I have just got that's here, I think. Got a cute picture of him. With his first grandchild. He's sitting on the dock there fishing.
How about that? Is this your son?
That's my son, my oldest one. And he was the first grandchild.
I hadn't thought about that, but that must be true. The first grandchild.
Mhm.
Marion never had any children,
No,
did she?
none of them did. I'm the only one that ever had any children.
And you
there were
had
6
two
of us.
boys?
I have 4, or had
Four?
4. I have 3. One was killed. But none of them ever had any.
Kind of a grandfather, Mr. Edison.
Oh, he was a very good grandfather.
Did he spoil the grandchildren the way he never spoiled his children?
No, I don't. Well, no, I don't think he really did much about it. But he's very interested. And when my 4th child was born, we wanted to call him Michael. And why call him Michael? Oh, that was terrible. He'd be called Mike, and that would be awful. And so he sent me in the hospital. He sent me 90 names that we could call him instead of Michael. So we called him Michael.
He was very insistent upon names, because I seem to have read somewhere that your mother wanted to call you Grace.
Yes.
And he insisted on calling you Madeleine.
Yes. Well, she gave in. I was called Grace it's in my birthday book that way, Grace Edison. And then it says finally changed to Madeleine Edison. He always did the birthday books because he could write so nicely. So Mother made him do that. And what happened was that right up to the baptismal font, I was called Grace. And then when they asked Mother the child's name, she said, Madeleine. So Madeleine. And it's so near my other sister, my sister's name, Marion. We get mixed up all the time. We used to.
Did he worry about what you would name his first grandchild?
No, not the first one.
Just the 4th one?
He was Thomas Edison Sloane, without a doubt. The next one was John. That was easy. And Peter's because we liked the name. And Michael because we liked the name. And Father had Victor and Claude and all kinds of Percy. And, well, they just, besides the ones that are ordinary names, like George and so forth. Doctor thought I should call him George after him. But we stuck to Michael, but we called him 3 other names too. So he could have a choice if it was so awful, as Father said. So he was Michael Nicholas Samuel Edison Sloane. Oh dear. But he was about 9 months old when Father died. And I took him over there one day. He loved babies, you know, that the father did. Oh, he loved them. And so Mother would want me to bring the baby over, and I'd go in over there. And there was this telephone thing. You've seen those pencils that are attached by a long wire to the telephone. Well, the baby wanted the pencils, and he couldn't get it. See, it wouldn't work. And so he finally decided in his mind that he would get that pencil, and he took the thing in his hand, the chain, and went all the way down and grabbed the pencil. And Father was perfectly delighted. He says, "Bright boy." So he was interested in them.
The picture that you showed me, he was taking the oldest one fishing in Fort Myers.
He's bringing him up in the way he should go.
Did he take his own sons fishing?
Oh, yes. Took Charles all at the time. Charles was a companion, sort of, you see. And he took me once, and we caught 40 fish. And I was very proud to be taken, because I didn't like this Charles going off all the time and me sitting home with my dolls. So that was my triumph, 40 fish. But I don't like fishing much.
Except for that one time.
Except for that one time. That was just more of a triumph.
How was your father with neighbors? Did he
Well, he didn't have any uh, much to do with the neighbors. He liked some of them, but I don't
He
think...
probably didn't have time.
No, I don't think he spent much time. And no, he wouldn't have, because he'd come up at any old hour, you know. And when he did come, he was tired, and I don't think he enjoyed that kind of thing.
He must have needed the Fort Myers vacations really to
Yes,
rest up.
he did. And
Did he do any work while he was down there? Was it just pure
oh, he always
vacation?
worked. He had a laboratory down
He
there.
did?
But that wasn't work for him. It was just playing around. And that's where he did a lot of goldenrod experimenting.
Mhm.
See, they had great patches of goldenrod. They tried out everything. And I have some letters there that were written on the yacht, too, in the war. You know, he was out on somebody's yacht,
Mm-hmm.
experimenting on these, something to do with trying to save the ships from being blown up by the submarines and so forth. And that was, I don't think he enjoyed that too much. I don't think he enjoyed working for the government.
Well, he seems to be too much of an individualist.
Yes, I think all the red tape sort of bothered him. And he didn't want to be away from here.
He said somewhere he couldn't understand how an inventor could be for hire. An inventor was a
I don't
private
think
person.
he would ever have been for hire.
So he would never have approved of these
He
mass
wouldn't have been hired
laboratories.
long, I imagine.
No, just enough to get a few good, well-chosen words put in, and that was it. You say your father read an awful lot. A lot of it was technical books, wasn't it?
Yes. And he could remember the very page where the thing was after he read it.
It sounds like he had almost a photographic
Well, he
memory.
had, I think he must have had. Because
Okay.
he could remember we would try to get these references, you see, and he'd go over them, and he always knew where they were after that. So he must have had a photographic memory.
When he took Charles on trips, was this an effort to sort of make Charles to be like him as much as possible?
I think so. I think he was brought up in Father's image, and I think Theodore would have been, only Theodore is also an individualist.
Yes.
Very much so. And he couldn't mold him as well. But he did bring Charles up, I think, just as he wanted. Charles could do no wrong.
Charles sort of knew that he was being geared to follow in his father's
Yes, I think that
footsteps.
was the idea. And he always called, I think when Theodore was born, he called him the little laboratory assistant. That's what he was supposed to do.
Do you think your father would have approved of Charles going into politics?
I don't know. I wonder. He must, 1931, wasn't he living when Charles was governor? I can't think when he was governor.
It was after 31. It must have been, he was part of the Roosevelt cabinet.
Yes,
so
and
it
that
was
would have
in
been 32, wouldn't it?
32 and after, yes.
That was really after,
Just
so
after
he
your
didn't
father
know.
died.
I don't know what he would have thought. Of course, he worried about this country himself.
He was not really in politics himself, although he was
Oh,
in.
no.
But I noticed somewhere in one, you said there was a big political meeting here, 750 people.
Oh, that was, Mother was the politician.
Was she?
Mother was, Mother was working for Hoover. And I think it was at that time we had that big thing. And he was interested in Hoover too. I mean, he liked Hoover. But Mother was really campaigning. And she went down to the old ladies' home here and dressed up all the old ladies and took them out to vote.
No.
For Hoover. Oh, yes. I think that's the time that my family were all, Hoover was just saint on earth. And the other family were for Al Smith, and he was a saint on earth. And I got so tired of hearing about it, I went down and voted for Norman Thomas.
Did you ever tell them?
I didn't tell him, no. I didn't.
That would have raised
But
an
I
eyebrow.
really, I knew that they couldn't be as saintly as they both said, and I got sick of it. So, I thought Norman Thomas couldn't do much harm.
He certainly couldn't win anyway.
Yes, I thought I was safe. It was a very flippant thing to do.
What do you think your father would have said about women's rights and women's lib?
Well, he was the only suffragette in the family.
Your father?
Yes.
I'll be darned.
But I think that it was, oh, let the dear things have what they want. They won't do much harm. I don't think he'd expect Bella Abstrud, or whatever her name is, and a few of the others.
But he certainly wanted you to be as forthright and strong as you could be, though.
Well, within reason. Of course, you were always a woman, and certain things women did not do.
Oh, what did he consider that a woman shouldn't do?
Well,
ride a horse.
Yes, ride a horse. There, yes. She did what her husband told her to. Period.
Oh, that came through in your letters. I'm glad he's used to write to you that you did what your mama asked you to do.
And we were supposed to be good, kind creatures and take care of our husbands and fathers. But I don't think he expected any militants. But he was for a suffragette, and Mother and I were not. Who wants it?
Now that's one of the most surprising things I've heard.
What?
Your father being a suffragette.
Oh yes, he believed in that. Well, he was a very just person, and after all, why is there discrimination? But we didn't care.
And your mother was interested in politics too.
Well, yes, she was interested when she was working for somebody that she believed in.
Do you think this is what probably may have gotten Charles interested in politics later on?
Well, I don't know. We were all sort of fooled around with. We feel rather strongly about this country and so forth. All of us did, I think. But I don't know why he selected what he did. Because I was not a Roosevelt admirer. But this family always went every which way, you know. One man was going to write Life of Father, an author, I can't remember his name, but he said they were the one, what did he say? What is the animal that is part mule and part donkey? You know what I mean. What's
Jackass?
No, it's another word. Maverick, yeah. He said our family was the most wonderful bunch of mavericks he'd ever seen. That being our ancestors and all.
Your brother Theodore still is.
Yeah, he's maverick, all right.
He writes extensively about environment, about Vietnam.
Yeah.
About a number of topics over the years. He's constantly doing that.
He's a very interesting person, I think.
He gave me a package of his papers, of his publications over the past few years, and there's quite a diversity in there. There's not just one topic, but many topics.
He's interested in all sorts of things. And he has invented, some things. Basics.
Yes. Well, he had his own company at one time. I think it was in 31.
I guess so.
Just before your
Right.
father died, he went out and formed his own company.
And then he gave all his, really put his money over to the employees, you know.
Yes, I read that too. It was well over $1 million, as I remember. $1 million plus.
He's quite a boy. But you don't have him to lunch unless you want to spend the afternoon. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You probably had samples.
You've heard of Bobby Jones, haven't you?
Yes, the golf man.
Right.
Yeah.
They once said about Bobby Jones, when you asked him the question, you better sit back and spend a little while listening. When you ask a Georgia boy for something, you better be prepared to hear him out.
Well, that's Theodore. But it's very interesting.
Well, I'm not going to take much more of your time because I think I pushed you a little much. I think
end side 2, March 13th, 1973. End second interview with Mrs. Sloane.